All right, Jess, we've come to that time. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do this thing.
All right, so I promised some quarterback talk for rapid fire, and that's where we're going to now is quarterback talk. You haven't had the chance to talk quarterbacks yet, so I'm going to ask you for your depth chart. What is Notre Dame's quarterback depth chart right now? Steve Angeli, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey, 1 through 3. What's it look like? Go.
Yeah, number one is CJ Carr. I think he provides the most dynamic ability for this offense, involving all the playmakers, moving the ball down the field, and really becoming a total offense at the end of the day, providing a nice complement to an already elite running game, a rather elite, you know, offensive line that's only going to continue to get better, because that was the main thing, is they just had a lot of inexperience, but they're going to continue to get, better and better. And so I think that this rushing offense needs a true complement, and that's an elite passing game. And I think CJ Carr gives you the most dynamic ability in the passing game. And I think what CJ Carr also has comparatively, he has natural instincts that are better than Minchey and Steve Angeli, and I think he has better feet and the ability to make plays off script, right? Like when Steve Angeli's making a play off script is throwing the ball out of bounds or making the right play in terms of just dumping the ball out. CJ Carr is more like Patrick Mahomes when he's making plays off script. He's still, pushing the ball downfield, trying to make dynamic, explosive plays. And that's probably going to come back to bite him at some point, but I would rather see that in a college offense led by Mike Denbrock and knowing how dynamic that he can be in an offense. I would much rather see that than kind of the conservative route of just dumping the ball out. So CJ Carr is definitely number one.
I was going to say, I really feel like you're spending an exorbitant amount of time defending your CJ Carr pick at number one. Like,
just got to give a lot of facts to start this thing.
You backed it up. I like it. Okay. So
number two,
CJ Carr, in case anyone missed it, is number one in Jesse's depth chart.
Number two would be Kenny Minchey. And the reason why I have to say Kenny Minchey is at this point in their career, here's where I'm at. Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, neck and neck. I just have to go with the guy who has more service time remaining. Kenny Minchey is younger. I think he provides more dynamic ability. And so if him and Angeli are this close, I just don't see any real advantage of rolling out Steve Angeli at the end of the day, because he's not a difference maker. Kenny Minchey can still be a difference maker. We saw him score that touchdown with his feet. We saw his ability to kind of move the pocket. I'll take that over what Steve Angeli can do at the end of the day. And so naturally that puts Steve Angeli at number three. And I don't want it to seem like this is, I hate Steve Angeli or whatever. I just need to go with what gives this offense the best chance of winning. And unfortunately, the guy who's just consistently, maybe doing the right play or getting the ball out 5 to 10 yards down the field with no real chance at making the playmaker type play, then I don't really necessarily care about it, because what's going to happen is this offensive line and running back room is going to naturally suck the defense in. They're going to get heavy towards the box. And what does that mean? You need a quarterback who can beat you downfield and man-to-man or make some more layered throws. And I just don't think Steve Angeli can do those things quite like CJ Carr can. And I don't know if it's just a mental block, like he just doesn't want to cut the ball loose, and CJ Carr has more or less regard and kind of more of that daredevil in him. But with how good this run game and offensive line are going to be and how crowded that box is going to get, they need someone who can legitimately push the ball downfield and make downfield plays. I think CJ Carr is the best option when you're considering those things.
I agree with that. I mean, Carr is, again, like Vince and I spent a lot of time talking about quarterbacks yesterday, but Carr is the number one between his pre-snap reads, his ability to process quickly, his ability to throw open receivers consistently, And, like just the way he goes through it all, the arm talent, his ability to really to have like the full control, full command of the offense. It is completely different than either of the other two. I mean, to me, that is more than obvious. It is a little bit. Well, I definitely agree with your points about Minchey is younger and there is more talent there. Like, how much should like a quarterback's ability to himself have pretty good command of the offense, to come in as a backup off the bench the way Angeli did last year, like in the Orange Bowl. How confident are you that Kenny Minchey, where he is right now, if he were thrown into a pinch, would be able to come in and do the same type thing that Steve Angeli did?
And I think that's
what makes it a little bit harder for me than maybe it is for some other people.
You could trust Steve Angeli to come in a high leverage situation and do a pretty solid job. I don't think you could say the same about Kenny Minchey at the end of the day. I think he would not be as cool and calm under pressure. Like, I don't think if they went through this whole season, I don't think Kenny Minchey could have produced a drive against Penn State like Steve Angeli did this past season, essentially. So, that's going to be ultimately the conversation is, do you want a guy who's more or less like your starting quarterback, or do you want a guy like who was our guy that has been Dak's backup that just went to Baltimore? Like, he can run the offense.
Yeah.
Cooper Rush. He's going to do a solid job, and he'll ultimately give you, maybe a chance to win, but he's not doing anything spectacular at the end of the day, right? He's running the offense how it's supposed to be run. I think that's what Steve Angeli I think of Steve Angeli as like a solid NFL backup quarterback at the end of the day. That would be his role on this team. Considering, worst case scenario, if the starter got hurt, you could go to Steve Angeli and he'd be pretty steady Eddie. He's not going to give you that amazing playmaking difference type of throw, but he's also probably not going to turn the ball over at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, you could win a lot of games with Steve Angeli at quarterback, but he's not going to lead you to a national championship. And I think that that's part of this as well. Like, between the three, Carr is definitely out front there. And with the, the upside and everything else that Minchey has, I think you have to put him at number 2 on this. Like, ultimately, like we've talked about, being a downfield offense and Carr's ability to do that much more consistently than either of the other two. If Steve Angeli is the quarterback, essentially 80 to 90% of your passes are all going to be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. And you were talking about stacked boxes, and you're going to have stacked boxes. You're going to have guys jamming receivers at the line of scrimmage. You're never going to throw anything downfield. It's really, I'm not saying he's Drew Pine, but the offense is just going to look a little bit more like that. If Angeli were the guy in comparison. And I think that Kenny Minchey just gives you the ability to run a more open offense.
And so what was everyone's biggest complaint last season is that we could run the ball, but Riley Leonard can never push the ball downfield, and especially against those teams that were, bringing more players into the box. And we needed Riley Leonard to probably beat Ohio State more and man-to-man passes early on in the game. And so if you were those same people kind of criticizing where the passing game was last year and the lack of, the downfield playmaking ability and the deep ball and all that kind of stuff, then CJ Carr should be your guy, because all Steve Angeli is Riley Leonard without the legs at the end of the day.
Right.
In terms of like
the running game, the running game is not going to be nearly as effective, obviously, as
right.
a result.
And so if you really think that Steve Angeli and Riley Leonard's passing abilities and how they're able to pass the ball downfield are super different, then you're just kind of mistaking yourself, because they have very similar passing skill sets and abilities. But what CJ Carr brings is that downfield dynamic playmaking ability. And I think that's just super crucial, knowing where Notre Dame is at in the running back room and the offensive line room.
Yeah, with the kind of running backs they have, that's going to continue to open up the running game as well.
And so teams coming into this season, I am almost 100% can guarantee you they're going to err on having a heavier box and stopping the run game early and forcing Notre Dame's quarterbacks to move the ball downfield over their head. Yeah. And so if that's the type of play that is needed, CJ Carr gives you the best chance of running an offense to complete plays like that.
Good call, Josh, because Ian Book is the much more apt comparison. Like Steve Angeli is much more like Ian Book. You can win a lot of games with Steve Angeli, but ultimately you're not going to beat elite teams with Angeli as your starting quarterback. That's the difference to me. Like you can win probably, again, like 85, 90% of your games with a guy like him that plays that game. But you're also going to have tighter games, more chances for upsets and all those different kind of things, because ultimately I think that everything would have to be perfect. Whereas if you have guys like CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey, not everything is going to have to be perfect for you to go out and win consistently with those guys at quarterback. So based on what we saw from the Notre Dame quarterbacks on Saturday, this is something that I still have seen come up over the last few days. Did it lend any validity to the idea of Steve Angeli being the starter at the start of the season, because you're going on the road, playing a couple tough teams to start off the season, and then transitioning into CJ Carr at some point?
No, it lends no further validity. And honestly, it's nonsense in my opinion. You can't, seriously, like you need to put, if you're worried about CJ Carr performing in the big game and the big stage, then you would want him to do that against Miami rather than in a first round playoff game, a game 11 or game 12 where you need to win in order to get into the playoffs, or, whatever it might be. There's more room for error in CJ Carr's game in game 1 of the season than there is in the first round of the playoffs, second round of the playoffs, etc. So I think you just gotta cut it loose and bite the bullet. And I'd rather do that early on in the season when there's less at stake, versus later on in the season when everything is at stake and when it's almost a win and go home type situation. And so CJ Carr needs that experience. You can't say, all right, we're going to start Steve game 1 and then start CJ Carr the rest of the season, and now it's round one of the playoffs, and he hasn't played in a meaningful, serious, competitive, high-leverage game because you decided to send him out against Miami. So that's where I'm at.
Start the best quarterback, period. That's what it comes down to. Angeli's not the best quarterback. CJ Carr is the best quarterback. And the idea that Angeli has all this experience and that would be a benefit because you're going on the road and that should matter, it's just completely overblown to me. And we've talked about it before. Angeli has one career start. So as soon as either CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey makes his first start, they'll have as many career starts, the exact same amount that Steve Angeli has right now. One start, that's it. The experience advantage Angeli has is relative. Like if I serve you a cup of coffee and you've never served anyone a cup of coffee, well, I've got an advantage over you in serving cups of coffee, right? That's why they use the term cup of coffee in baseball for a guy who's had a cup of coffee in the big leagues. He's been there, but what did it ultimately amount to? Wasn't much. He got something, but it was a cup of coffee. There was not much out of it. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Jameis Winston and Johnny Manziel were both redshirt freshmen when they won their Heisman trophies. And when they were redshirts, they played 0 because they didn't have the 4-game rule back then. Neither of them had taken a snap before they became the starter in the season in which they won Heisman trophies. They each won a Heisman trophy in their redshirt sophomore seasons. They started every game those seasons for Florida State and Texas A&M. So if you're good enough, you're good enough. And CJ Carr is good enough. So the experience factor, you've got to, for some reason, still start Steve Angeli. BS. Start the best guy, period. That's what it comes down to. So someone posted a comment at the end of the show last night about Tyler Buchner. I believe it was Brian NY. And we mentioned the possibility, that Buckner, maybe he goes back to the quarterback room if the Irish were to lose a couple quarterbacks in the transfer portal here, coming up in the next 10 days. And the comment that he made was Buckner is not a good quarterback, and he wouldn't want to see him at the position again, even if both Angeli and Minchey left. So my question to you, Jess, do you buy or sell that?
Yeah, I buy that. There's no reason that Tyler Buchner should move back to quarterback. First of all, he tried that and he wasn't highly effective. He wasn't a great college quarterback at the end.
You want a Gator Bowl though, right?
But and then to kind of go along with that, like he's not even in quarterback shape anymore. Like if you see his body, he's a lot skinnier. He doesn't have as much muscle on him. Like it would be a process to kind of get him back into quarterback shape. So it's just a big sell for me. There is no reason that he should be back in the quarterback room. I think ultimately I would prefer them to try to go into the portal and get an emergency quarterback before I'd move Tyler Buchner back over.
That would be first preference. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. Brian, I generally agree with what you're saying, but I also think, okay, so like if, and I'm saying if, I'm using my air quotes, but if you were to lose, both your number 2 and number 3 guys, let's say CJ Carr is sitting at the top of the depth chart and you lost both of these guys to the transfer portal, then you've got Blake Hebert as your backup, true freshman, right? I just don't think it would hurt to have a guy who has at least played the position in the room as an insurance policy. Like even if it's only in fall training camp, like taking some snaps as the number 3 guy to get some familiarity with the position, just in case, something happened down the line over the course of the season where you would need him. Because, again, like otherwise, I know you have Rece in there and, look, I'm just being honest. Like Rece looks like he at least has a fair grasp of the offense. We didn't see him running any plays out there in the blue gold Saturday. We've seen him throw the ball a little bit and his arm looks nothing like any of the other guys in the room, so there's a noticeable difference there. So like, I just feel like he is a potential insurance policy if it ever got to that point. But I do agree with what you're saying. I would want to try to go to the portal first. But again, like what you might be able to get in the spring transfer portal in terms of a guy who's going to come in pretty much knowing, like he's going to be the backup when he gets here. I think that could be a guy who's hard to find.
Let me put it like this. I would rather go to Justin Fisher than I would Tyler Buchner at quarterback.
Man, you were way down on Tyler Buchner. Justin Fisher is a little bit too bulked up right now to be able to throw the football.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same situation. You'd have to put muscle on Tyler Buchner to get him back. So it's like either way, you're forcing someone to kind of, mold into something that they used to be or, are no longer. And so I think Justin Fisher would be more dynamic at quarterback than Tyler Buchner. And I think that Fisher has run a good amount of scout quarterback in the past as well. So it's like, I know he comes from the triple option. And so like what threat would he actually have in terms of throwing the ball? But hey, we could run a triple option with this, with the running backs in this room.
Why not? Right.
I'm just like, that's how dramatic I'm trying to be of like,
okay.
I would rather have Fisher than I would.
I get you.
Buchner back there.
Yeah. Love Justin Fisher, but I don't think that I would want him running it. But I get your, like you saying, you're just trying to prove your point that you wouldn't want it to happen. I didn't realize you'd be so dead set against it.
It's just not him anymore.
Sure.
I just don't. I think that's he's past that, and then I don't think there's any reason to like that chapter in his life, his football career is closed and over. There's just no advantage for him forcing him to kind of go back into that role. They tried it. He tried it at Alabama, and it was a failure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. Exactly. That's why he's back here as a walk-on receiver, obviously. So WNBA draft last night. Sonia Citron went 3rd overall to Washington. Maddy Westbeld went in the 2nd round to Chicago, and Liatu King in the 3rd round to the LA Sparks. Did anything surprise you? Like, anything jump out at you from those draft picks last night?
Yeah, I think Sony is going to be the most interesting. The Mystics had 3 picks in the top 6. They're very clearly remaking their roster, and I think Sony is a really good fit because she has a wide-ranging skill set for a team that's trying to rebuild their roster. Right? She can play multiple positions. She can be used as a perimeter shooter. She can facilitate the ball. She's really good on defense. So I think she really fits in for a team that's trying to remake the lineup. And I think she's going to be just really good in that role at the end of the day. And I think, Maddy Westbeld going in the 2nd round, going to Chicago, I think the first thing that came to mind is good luck playing with Angel Rece in Chicago. That'd be my first and foremost concern for Maddy Westbeld.
Haley Van Lith there too. So.
Yeah, and so the Sky focused on offense with their first 2 picks before they got to Maddy. They drafted Svidka and Van Lith. Both are guards. And Westbeld is more of that, pick and pop kind of power forward, but she also does a lot of the little things. She's a good screener, solid defensive rebounder, good positional player on defense. Maddy Westbeld's not going to be a day 1 starter. She's going to come off the bench. And she's going to provide good looks, especially on defense and in the pick and roll, being that kind of stretch power forward for them.
I was going to say, getting back to her natural position, more stretch forward, power forward type player than, where she played this year, I think is going to help her out quite a bit. And I think it's going to be really interesting because, like you said, with what Chicago drafted ahead of her and kind of where they are, like she could be on the bubble in terms of making a roster. Like, it gets really hard to make rosters. 2nd round and 3rd round picks are not guaranteed anything, so it's going to be some work, but I'm sure she's going to get into training camp and make a go at it. And I feel like her getting back to that natural 4 position is going to help her out quite a bit.
Yeah, and then kind of, the last one there being Liatu King. Obviously, we only got 1 season of her, but I if you ask me, I thought she was the most important player on that team, and I think she ultimately was kind of the glue player, considering what was going on between the lack of production at the center, maybe some of the drama that was going on at the guard position. I thought her role was really huge as being that glue player. But her biggest thing in the WNBA is going to be her willingness to attack the defensive glass, and really just trying to play as big as possible for someone who's only 6 foot and probably considered a small forward in the WNBA. And you talked about players who might be on the fringe of making a roster. I think Liatu King is really going to be on the fringe of making a roster, but she has to exude tremendous effort on defense, and again, a willingness just to eat glass 24/7. Like Kawhi Leonard said, Boardman gets paid. That's how Liatu King is going to make this roster. If she can just continue to just be as close to a double-double player as possible in the WNBA, and that's when she was her most efficient at Notre Dame.
Yeah, because even if it doesn't translate into a true double-double in the WNBA, because players are going to be a little bit bigger, she just has a knack for the ball, and so like even if it's 8 and 8, like I think that she can definitely, just like the work ethic she has, the positioning she has, her nose, for the ball, and all those different things can definitely help a team. Like the Sony thing, I thought was, like Christopher is saying, the Mystic are going to be hard to deal with. They got Kiki Iriafen, they got Citron, and then they also got Georgia Amore, who's at Kentucky now. She followed Kenny Brooks from Virginia Tech to Kentucky. She was the point guard at Virginia Tech on their Final Four team a couple of years ago, and then went down to Kentucky this year. And did you see the interview with her afterwards? She's like, she's from Australia, and she's like, I always wanted to play with Sony. It's like, so I think that's pretty cool to hear her say that, because they played against each other for so long in the ACC, and to hear her say that, and like just the sheer talent that Washington got in the first round with those three players. Like, they had that cluster of, out of 4 picks, they 4 draft picks overall, they had those 3 players that they were able to pick up. So I agree. I think that they're going to be a real contender here in a few years with the talent that they added, starting with Sony last night. So good for them. There's going to be some other play. I thought it was really interesting, and I don't know how closely you paid attention, but like, the Golden State Valkyries are an expansion team, and they went with a European player right off the bat.
That's bold.
That feels like a swing and a miss for me, because like, you want to try to, like, get the attention of your fan base, like a face of the franchise type player with, your very first round pick. It felt like a miss. I mean, I don't know what this player is going to be, but there are like so many really star American type players who I think that you could have, come in and really marketed yourself around. I just feel like it's going to be harder to do that, bringing in a European player like that.
Yeah, I guess you just blame Olivia Miles at the end of the day, because she was supposed to be number 2.
She would have been one of those, right? All right. According to sports media reporter Andrew Marchand of The Athletic, Fox Sports made an all-out effort to get Rece Davis away from ESPN's College GameDay to become the host of Big Noon Kickoff on Fox, and also be one of the faces of its networks. But Rece Davis said no, turned it down. He took a raise from ESPN instead, even though he's not making as much apparently as what the offer from Fox would have been. But he would have replaced current host Rob Stone on Big Noon Kickoff. So good move, bad move. I can't even say it, for Rece Davis.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to make a lot of people mad with, what I'm about to say, but I think Rece Davis is a better fit for ESPN. I prefer ESPN's College GameDay over Fox's Big Noon Football. I think Rece Davis obviously has good chemistry and rapport with, Kirk Herbstreit, and the various other personalities on the ESPN show. It's kind of coming back to comfortability at the end of the day, right? Like, if you go on to Fox, now you got to reestablish relationships, kind of reestablish your role on that show, feel like you're not stepping on people's toes. Like, all those things are already solved on ESPN, and I prefer the ESPN show, and I enjoy Rece Davis at the end of the day. And so when I think of College GameDay, I think of Rece Davis. And I think it just would have been weird seeing him do the Fox show at the end of the day.
I think he would have brought a lot more credibility and a lot different feel to that Big Noon Kickoff
for sure
show. And I think that that's obviously why Fox.
Well, one would get better and the other one would get worse, right?
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
It's like, if you're ESPN, you're trying to keep the guy that makes your show good. And if you're Fox, you're trying to take away that guy so your show could be better at the end of the day.
I think it's a good move too. I mean, he's been at ESPN for something like 3 decades or something like that now. And he's also got a lot of, got a lot of rapport with the guys that he's worked with. He's worked with everybody, but Saban and McAfee for like at least 10 years now at this point. Saban was his first year last year. McAfee's been around for a couple of years. So I think it's good for him, and it's good for ESPN as well. And like like, I don't watch a lot of those shows, because typically what happens is I'm either doing something in the morning while that show is going on, before we've got a Notre Dame game going on, or I miss that show because I'm going over to the stadium, to do a Notre Dame game. But when I watch them, that's the one that I'm going to watch 90% of the time, because people still talk more about what's going on game day. And again, I think that that's why Fox wanted to make a move like that, because it really would have given them, a good leg up by essentially having a point guard who can go out and distribute at a high level like Rece Davis. How are you feeling though if you're Rob Stone on Fox, knowing that Fox was out trying to bring in a big gun like Rece Davis?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Rob Stone, I'm kind of feeling like an idiot, because my boss was actively looking for someone to replace me. And when they said no, they just probably going to act like nothing happened at the end of the day, right? Like, Rob Stone had to hear about it. And it's not a great feeling to know that you are being basically you're doing a good enough job, but they don't feel like you're doing a great enough job to make you that like to separate yourself or to give you the leg up on your competition. And so that would be a crappy feeling if I'm Rob Stone. Like I'm good enough, but you don't view me as great, and you actively tried to replace me. And now I'm just supposed to sit here and act like nothing happened because that plan fell through.
Keep looking over your shoulder. That's right. I mean, I don't know who else they could go out to and try to get at this point, because obviously there aren't too many people, that fill those seats. And I agree with Brian NY. Rob Stone is good too.
Oh, he's good.
But he's just not at Rece Davis's level. And I think part of it is because Rece Davis has just done it for so long. Like Rece Davis is good, but part of that is because of the reps that he's put in. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's done a lot of different things at ESPN. Stone is good. He's just not, just like the quarterback position, right? Like they can all be good, but someone's got to sit at the top of the heap. And I think that Stone is just a notch or two behind Rece Davis, which again is why, Fox wanted to get Davis.
I think there's two good comments in the chat right now. Swan Dong makes one of them. Fox needs to get Pat. I think Pat leading that Fox crew would probably be a relatively good idea. You'd lose credibility at the end of the day because I think Rob Stone is more professional and credible than Pat. But if you're really trying to bring, something new and new energy and enthusiasm, Pat would be a good option. And then I think Brian NY also makes a good point. It's not Stone, it's the other guys around him ultimately. And that's the big thing that Rece Davis would have to do is he'd have to pick up the pieces or elevate the pieces around him more. And I think that's ultimately, probably what's going on is Rob Stone has maybe maxed out his, ceiling in terms of kind of elevating the people around him. And it's like, well, what are you supposed to do when you got Urban Meyer sitting next to you and Charles Woodson and Brady Quinn, I'm cool with for obvious reasons.
Yeah, but you got
Reggie Bush is still out there.
Alabama Heisman winner.
Ingram,
Mark Ingram, and that's like as much as you might, not, be in on Desmond Howard. I think that there's a drop from Desmond Howard to Mark Ingram as well.
I'd take Desmond Howard over Mark Ingram. I'd take Nick Saban over Urban Meyer.
Yeah.
I'd take Kirk Herbstreit over Brady Quinn.
Ooh, would you? For sure?
He's around the game more. He's more submersed into the game, I think, too. Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from Brady Quinn, but, that's always been Kirk Herbstreit's job. Brady Quinn was a player, and then he became an analyst. Kirk Herbstreit's always been an analyst, and whether you like him or not, I think he does a good job.
Fox needs another personality on that show, beyond Quinn. Like Stone, Quinn, those would be the only two surefire keepers for me.
Yeah.
And other than that, I think there's a lot of work that they could do. Who would probably be good for them would be a guy like RG3, honestly. ESPN let RG3 go, and I feel like he could be someone, he was doing a lot of college football coverage for you. I feel like he's someone who could
he's corny, but I would take him over Mark Ingram at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's probably ultimately, what kind of led to, a pretty quick departure for RG3 is sometimes he does get a little bit too corny, like it's a little bit too much at some points, at some point you also do have to have a critical eye towards things. And I don't think that he always, does a great job of doing that. But again, I think that, there are enough other unique personalities in the TV game. And I think that you could do a lot worse than RG3, quite honestly. All right. So another move, CBS, again, according to Marchand, tried to hire Dan Orlovsky away from ESPN to be in its number one college football game analyst to replace the retiring Gary Danielson. But instead, Charles Davis is going to replace Danielson because Orlovsky is still at ESPN. What do you think of that decision by Orlovsky? You in or out? Like, did he make the right move there?
This is tough because I'm battling the line of what was maybe best for Dan Orlovsky and what was maybe best for my perception of Dan Orlovsky at the end of the day. I think Dan Orlovsky is way better of a college analyst than he is an NFL analyst at the end of the day.
Me
and
too.
I actually don't mind him as a college analyst because I think he provides a good amount of detail. He doesn't over-explain things. He makes things relatable to the everyday fan. And so I thought he would have really thrived in that role because of how good he is in the college game. And I like listening to him do college games as well. And so me personally, I think it's a bad move because I think he would have excelled more in this role. But for Dan himself, I'm sure that he would have told you he wanted more of that everyday role of being in the NFL analyst role.
Having his hands a little bit of everywhere.
He doesn't want to be in a singular lane of college football.
Yeah.
He wants to have his ability to, like you were saying, have his hands in a little bit of everything. But I think he would have done a tremendous job if he solely would have just focused on college football and that be his kind of everyday job.
I feel like he could have really raised his profile and carved a big niche by making a move like this and becoming the number one, and potentially opened himself up more opportunities down the road, like to potentially transfer, like into an NFL, type, game day booth as well with CBS, because obviously they carry both college football and the NFL. I feel like he sort of pigeonholed himself a little bit at ESPN and limited himself, because I've heard some interviews with him in the past, and this goes back to even before ESPN hired Buck and Aikman to do Monday Night Football, when he was like, he's been that number two Monday Night Football booth the last few years, and I'd heard him say that essentially he wants to be the number one guy, regardless of like whatever the biggest thing they have is, like he wants to be part of that. Well, as long as Buck and Aikman are at ESPN, I mean, you're talking about at least a decade down the road, probably, before that happens. So, like, if he wants to be the guy who is, broadcasting games and doing that kind of stuff, it really feels like this was a golden opportunity for him, like to get in there, be the number one college football analyst on a network, and, again, potentially open up some doors down the road to maybe he's doing a college game on Saturday and an NFL game on Sunday. Like it felt like that could have been a thing for him. But, I know you're not really high on him, like on NFL Live and stuff like that. But again, like when you talk about the chemistry of the crew, like he and Rutledge and some of the other people who do that show, I feel like they've got pretty good chemistry and he does a solid enough job. But it just feels like, again, there could have been more for him out there potentially.
I just enjoy him so much more as a game day analyst than I do as an everyday analyst, because I think what happens is as a game day analyst, you can get in your lane and he can just crunch film and focus and tell you what these guys are good
at. Nail these games week in and week out. Yeah,
exactly.
He's been good in the booth. Like the times that he's done some Notre Dame games, I thought he's done a really good job.
But when he does this everyday analyst thing, it just gets, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but it just gets dry because you're trying to come up with new kind of spins every day.
Yeah.
And the way this is not just singular to Dan Orlovsky, and this is the grind of having to do something every day on ESPN. You just find ways to kind of say things differently and it becomes controversial. And I think he's just not as subjective of an analyst as he is when he does college football games, right? For some reason, I just think his analysis is more fair and on point in the college game when he's doing games than vice versa when he's kind of zoomed out and looking at bigger picture of all the other things that are going on in the NFL world. Maybe I'm wrong and a little bit confusing, but that's just kind of the way I look at it.
No, I can see that. Mark makes a good point, and I was thinking about this as well. Like, Orlovsky is from Connecticut. He obviously played for the University of Connecticut, and ESPN is in Bristol, so maybe there's a comfort level, with that as well. The fact that he's got young kids and everything is right there. He's living in his home state, and if that's the case, then that's obviously great for him. Where he gets to be close to his family and stuff like that. But the other side of it is if you're doing games and that's your main job, you're only gone a couple days a week, like, so you can still be home quite a
just
bit.
sit at home and get a home theater and just crunch film all day.
Yeah. And it's not like CBS is like ESPN where they've got daily shows and that kind of stuff. So the job is a lot different from that aspect. Fill in the blank. It's blank that the Hard Knocks offseason edition with the New York Giants has been nominated for a Sports Emmy.
To me, it's just kind of surprising at the end of the day because, I feel like there's been better Hard Knocks seasons in the past, but I think that this whole drama with Saquon Barkley and the actual cuts of the GM is what made this kind of get nominated.
I think it's got to be
for an Emmy, right? And so to me, it's kind of funny at the end of the day because the Giants are just getting kind of this Emmy for, again, to me, it's like recognition for the fact that they messed up the Saquon Barkley thing all over again, because that's the reason why they're getting the Emmy nod, in my opinion.
That's the irony of this whole thing. I think it's got to be as well because, like, you caught all that stuff on film and you put it on TV. So
that's what the whole season was about.
Yeah, and that's all anybody is still talking about. And the fact that Hard Knocks has been around forever, and it's not just any Hard Knocks, it's specifically this Hard Knocks that had that happen. And because that happened, that's probably the reason you're nominated for an Emmy. But oh, by the way, it's also the reason that no NFL team is ever going to do an off-season edition with you, because they don't want to have that kind of stuff blow up in their face and happen to them. They had to go to North Carolina to try to get Bill Belichick to do a show, and then that blew up. So it's very ironic that this is what ends up getting nominated, considering we'll probably never see this edition of Hard Knocks again.
Let me ask you a question. Do the Eagles win the Super Bowl without Saquon Barkley?
No. No hesitation. No. No way.
Does Saquon Barkley set the single season rushing record, or almost, with any other team besides the Eagles?
Mm-hmm. He might have in San Francisco.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But do you kind of get what I'm getting at here? It's like it was just so dramatic that this blew up in the Giants' face, and then literally that guy goes on and is a huge reason why they win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And that's why this is getting a daytime Emmy, because there's just, or not daytime Emmy, but I said daytime Emmy because there's just so much drama baked into this thing. And that's the reason why it's getting the Emmy nod, is because of the drama that's baked into it. And then what Saquon Barkley was able to accomplish post breakup.
That's exactly it. That's it. Like, I think that like how much did the fact that because of what they caught on film with Saquon and the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl with Saquon Barkley, like how much did all of that play into it? Like the fact that they're getting this nomination. They'll probably end up winning the frickin' Emmy for it. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's show. Appreciate you, as always, being here. A lot of great stuff in the chat. Tonight, we will be back tomorrow. Of course, we've got our mailbag day coming up on a Wednesday. So get your questions ready for tomorrow's show. And rumor has it, we're even bringing We In, We Out back later this week. So looking forward to that. Jesse, great whiteboard earlier tonight. Hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Ivy Nation Sports Talk.